Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It's good to be back in the swing of the school year. Really, thanks a lot for a lot of the responses that you guys had on Monday's assignment. I really enjoyed reading those, seeing what you guys had to say about your breaks and your thoughts for the end of the school year. I kind of was surprised that so many of you were bummed that we're not going to be meeting in person anymore. I know a lot of you guys are going to be missing your friends and teachers and missing going to school. Yeah, just stay encouraged. I really just want you to keep working hard and doing your best, and we'll get through this together. I know it's not easy, but we're going to do our best. I miss going to school and seeing you guys every day also, but we got to make the most of what we got. So let's go ahead and get started. So we are starting a brand new module. In fact, this module is the very last module of Math 8. Woohoo! This is module 15. Hopefully we should be able to finish the entire book then by the time school is out, which is exciting. Okay, I wasn't sure if we'd be able to with this whole coronavirus thing, but we are in fact going to be able to finish everything, which is exciting. So this is module 15, which is really all about probability. Okay, so today's lesson is about the probability of simple events. Okay, our objective is to find a way to predict the outcome of future events using probability. Okay, now again, just a reminder, on your quiz at the end of this module, you will be able to use your notes. So make sure you're using good notes, you're taking all your notes. I would write down all of these vocab words here that are listed, because if we use these vocab words later on, you'll be able to just reference them and know exactly what we're talking about. Okay, so first thing is probability. Probability is the chance that an event will occur. Now, you guys learned a lot about this kind of stuff last year in 7th grade. This lesson is just kind of an introduction or kind of a refresher on what you guys learned last year. Okay, a simple event is one outcome or a collection of outcomes. An outcome is a possible result in a probability experiment. So like if I were to do something, an outcome is just one possible thing that could happen. Okay, and then complementary events are two events in which either one or the other must happen, but they cannot happen at the same time. Okay, so like an example of a complementary event would be like, let's say I flip a coin. You can't get both heads and tails at the same time with just one flip, right? So heads and tails are considered complementary events because it can't land on both at the same time. Okay, if you're only flipping it once. Okay. All right, so probability. The probability of an event is a ratio that compares the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. Now, this formula is very important. I do want you to write down this formula in your notes. Okay, the probability of an event. Now, this P, this stands for probability. The probability of something happening, some sort of event happening, is the number of favorable outcomes over the number of possible outcomes. Okay, so this part that's inside the parentheses is the event that you're trying to find the probability of. So maybe you want to find the probability of flipping a coin and it landing on heads. Okay, so let's say we want to know the probability of heads by flipping a coin. Okay, well, the number of favorable outcomes, we want to know the probability of it landing on heads. There's just one head on a coin, right? So there's one favorable outcome. How many possible outcomes are there? Well, you can get heads or tails. So there's two possible outcomes from flipping a coin. So the probability of getting heads is 1/2, or you could write it as a decimal, which is 0.5, or you could write it as a percent, which would be 50%. Okay. Now, you can also use probability to kind of determine the likeliness of something happening. Okay, so if you have a probability of 0 or 0%, like if it's got a 0% chance of happening, that means it's impossible. We say it's completely impossible, it won't happen. On the other side, if you have a probability of 1, or basically a probability of 100%, that means it is certain. Okay, it is absolutely going to happen. If it's 100% likely, that means it will happen for sure. Very few things have a 100% probability of happening, right? Okay, now let's say there's a 50% chance. That means it's as likely to happen as not, which means it's got a 1/2 probability, 0.5 or 50%. Anything between 0 and 1/2, we say that that's unlikely. Okay, so it could be 1/4, it could be 1/3, 0.25, 0.4. Anything that's between 0 and 0.5 or 0 and 50%, we say that's unlikely. Okay, if it's between 1/2 and 100%, so if it's somewhere in this range, we say that that's likely to happen. Okay. All right, so let's look at example number 1. Rolling a dice provides you with 6 possible outcomes, right? So if we got this dice here, there's 6 possible outcomes, right? We could get a 1, we could roll a 2, we could roll a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. The dice only contains one of each possible outcome, right? There's only one 1, there's only one 2, there's only one 3, and so on. What we want is we want to find the probability of rolling a 3 on the dice. So we're just rolling it one time. We roll it. I want to know how likely is it that I land on the number 3. Okay. So I want the probability of rolling a 3. Okay, so let's think about this. How many favorable outcomes are there? How many 3s are there on the dice? Well, there's just one number 3, right? So the number of favorable outcomes is 1. Then, on the bottom of this fraction, we want the number of possible outcomes. Well, how many possible numbers are there? How many possible things could we get from rolling a dice? Well, there's 6 possible outcomes. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or a 6. So there's 6 possible outcomes. So our probability then of rolling a 3 is 1/6. Now, we can write our probability as a fraction. We could write it as a decimal. So as a decimal, 1/6 is just 0.17. Or we could write it as a percent. 0.17 as a percent is 17%. So again, we could write it as 1/6, 0.17, or 17%. Okay, so let's think about this again. Let's say we think about what's the probability of rolling so we talked about the probability of rolling a 3. What's the probability of rolling a 6? Well, that's the exact same probability of rolling a 3, right? As long as it's a fair dice, okay, then it's the probability of rolling any number is the same, right? It's always going to be 1/6. Okay. All right. So example number 2. Let's say we flip a coin. What's the probability the coin will land on tails? Well, we kind of already talked about the probability of landing on heads, right? That's 1/2. The probability of landing on tails, then, well, that's also 1/2, right? There's one tail, so the number of favorable outcomes is 1. Number of possible, you can get heads or tails, so there's 2 possible outcomes. So that's 1/2. Which is 0.5 or 50%, right? Okay, example number 3. Let's say we add 10 marbles to a bag and close it. So we got this bag, we put 10 marbles in and close it. 3 of those marbles are blue, 7 of them are red. So 3 are blue, 7 are more red. If we pick one marble out of a bag at random, what's the probability that we pick out a blue one? So we want to know the probability of blue here. Okay, the number of favorable outcomes. So how many blue marbles are there in the bag? Well, it says right here there are 3 marbles that are blue. So there's 3 favorable outcomes. Then on the bottom, we want the number of possible outcomes. How many total marbles are there in that bag? There's 10, right? So our probability then is 3/10. Or again, you could write that as a decimal. 3/10 as a decimal is 0.3. Or you could write it as a percent, which would be 30% probability. Okay. Kind of going along with this then, what do you think the probability is of picking a red marble? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 red marbles, right? So that means there's 7 favorable out of a total of 10, which is 7 out of 10 probability of getting a red marble then, or 70%. Okay. 4th example. What if we have more than one favorable outcome? Okay. So here it says find the probability of rolling a dice and getting an even number. So we talked about the probability of getting any one number on the dice, right? But what if we want to know the probability of rolling a dice and getting an even number? So here, in this situation, there's actually, we can roll a dice and more than one of the outcomes could be favorable. Okay? So we want to know the probability of getting an even number. So what's the number of favorable outcomes here? How many even numbers are there on a dice? Well, there's the number 2, the number 4, and then the number 6. That's 3 even numbers on the dice, right? So the number of favorable outcomes is 3. The number of possible outcomes, again, there's still 6 possible outcomes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So that's a probability of 3 over 6, which we want to reduce that to 1/2. So the probability that we get an even number is 1/2. We could write that as a decimal, 0.5, or we could write that as a percent, which is 50%. Okay. What do you guys think the probability then of rolling an odd number is? Well, that's also the same thing, right? Because you can get a 1, a 3, or a 5. That's 3 odd numbers on the dice. 3 out of 6 is 1/2. So that's actually the same probability. Okay. Example number 5, let's say the spinner on the right is spun once. What is the probability of spinning each of the following events? So we've got this spinner here. Okay, we're flicking that little spinner to see what color it lands on. So let's say we want to know the probability of getting green. Okay, well first we want to know how many green sections there are. Well, I see just one green section right here, right? So the number of favorable outcomes on top is 1. On the bottom, we want the total number of outcomes. So the total number of sections there are on the spinner. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total sections. So the probability of getting green is 1/10. You could also say 0.1 or 10%. Okay. Next, the probability of getting pink or yellow. Let me go ahead and erase these markings here. Now, we still have the same spinner, so there's still 10 total outcomes on the bottom. On top, now we want to know how many of these outcomes could be pink or yellow. Well, there's 1 pink section here, and then there's 1 yellow section. So there's a total of 2 favorable outcomes on top. Then we want to reduce that. 2 over 10 reduces to 1 over 5. So on top, you list all of the different outcomes that we consider favorable. In this case, favorable is pink or yellow, so there's 2 of each, or 1 of each, for a total of 2. On the bottom, you list how many total outcomes there are. Last one, the probability of getting black, white, or brown. Okay, let me erase these 2 marks here. Okay, black. Okay. Well, first of all, there's still 10 total outcomes on this spinner, right? Black, there's just 1 black section, there's just 1 white section, and then there's only 1 brown section. How many total favorable outcomes are there? There's 1, 2, 3 favorable. That's 3 out of 10. Okay, 3 out of 10 could be 0.3. You could also write it as 30%. Okay. All right, next, last thing we're going to go through for today. A coin can't land on both heads and tails at the same time, right? We talked about this. You can't flip a coin once and have it land on both heads and tails at the same time, right? It's got to either land on heads or tails. So heads and tails are considered complementary events. This is an important vocab word as well for you to remember. Okay. The sum of the probability of an event and its complement is 100%. That's important for you to understand. So the probability of landing on heads is 50%. The probability of landing on tails is also 50%, right? So if you combine those, 50% plus 50% is equal to 100%, right? So the sum of the probability of an event and its complement is 100%. The complement of flipping heads is tails. The complement of flipping tails is heads. Okay. So it says, what is the probability of not flipping heads? Okay. Well, if you don't flip heads, you're flipping tails, right? So the probability of not flipping heads. So the probability of flipping heads is 50%, right? Well, if we know that this If we don't flip heads, the only thing that's left is flipping tails. So the probability of not flipping heads is also 50%. Okay. What if we go back to this dice example? Okay. We know that the probability of flipping a 3 is 1/6. What's the probability of not flipping a 3? Well, that's everything that's left. We could get a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. The probability of not flipping a 3 is 5/6. These add up. 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 out of 6 is 100% then. All right. Okay, so this example says a letter tile is chosen randomly. Find the probability of each of the following events. Write each answer as a fraction, percent, and a decimal. If we want to know the probability of picking a D, well, there's only one D here, right? Okay, so that's 1 out of a total of, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tiles. So that's 1 out of 9. Okay, as a decimal, that's 0.11. As a percent, that's 11%. Okay. Next, the probability of S, V, or L. By the way, I would really recommend pausing this video and doing these on your own, okay, just to see if you can figure it out on your own. The probability of getting an S, V, or an L. Okay, let me erase these other ones here. Okay, there's one S, there's one V, and there's one L. So how many favorable outcomes are there? Well, there's 3 favorable outcomes out of a total of 9 outcomes. 3 over 9 reduces to 1/3. You can write that as 0.33 or 33%. And then the probability of not D. Well, there's only one D here. So if we say not D, that means every other tile is considered favorable. All of these here are considered favorable. Well, how many are there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are not D out of 9. Okay, that is approximately 80.89, which is 89%. Okay. All right. So your assignment for today is on Edulastic. It's the probability of simple events assignment. Now, if you remember on Monday, I talked about how for each class I'm going to start doing a weekly Q&A session where I'm going to kind of host something on Canvas where you can come. It's going to be a video conference where you can come, you can ask me questions face to face. I can help you if you have any help, if you need any help with any of your homework assignments or you just have a question in general. I'm going to be hosting these on Canvas every Wednesday for this class. So, and that's starting today. So this lesson is on Wednesday. I'm starting today at 1 p.m. Okay. So if you're struggling with this assignment, feel free to swing by. This is completely optional. You don't have to come. Okay. But if you have questions or you need help, feel free to stop by this Q&A at 1 p.m. today. It's going to last an hour, so I'll be here until 2 o'clock. So from 1 to 2 p.m., I will be here at my computer ready to answer any questions that you might have. Everybody will get an invite to it. You don't have to come. You don't have to show up. But if you want to, you can come and get help. Even if you don't have any like specific questions, maybe you just want to hear other people's questions and kind of listen in on how I'm helping them so that you can get help. You can do that too. Or if you just want to swing by and say hello, you can do that also. Okay, so that's starting at 1 p.m. today, and that'll happen every Wednesday then at 1 p.m. Okay, now this is going to be the very first time I've ever done a Canvas conference, so if it doesn't work, we're going to have to try and figure something out. We'll work through it together. I'm going to need your help to make this happen. So if you've done it, some of you have probably done it in some of your other classes, and you'll be able to help me if I'm struggling with something. So feel free to come by and help me out. So we can get this figured out. Okay. I hope you guys have a great day. Again, if you have any questions, you don't have to come to this. You can always just send me an email too if you have any questions. So hope you guys have a good day and continue to stay safe. See you guys.